Thank Marty. It's really like a privilege to talk to you. You're a legend. I tell my friends that I'm friends with you, like that I know the person that invented the cell phone. Every time I hear from you, I learn something new. And your offer to, record with us and just share with me and share with some of the people that follow us on LinkedIn and other channels, like about innovation and about your perspectives. It's just one more way to, memorialize some of the great things you've brought to the world and learn from you, and hopefully, make some breakthroughs at New Current, in the same innovative mold that you've created and left as a legacy here in Chicago, but also for the world. So thank you again.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Jacob, but I have to say that the inverse is true. It's my privilege to be with you. You're in the real world. I'm just thinking about things now. I'm a has-been. Being able to talk to somebody that's doing breakthroughs in what I think is an explosive industry is a privilege for me. So thanks for inviting me.
I will not let you get away with calling yourself a has-been. I think the proper word is legend, and you are. So, and we reevaluated your book, just kind of looked at it when we were preparing for this. I'd already read it. I had you sign it for me one time. I love having my personal signed copy. It's a little guilty pleasure of mine if I get to meet an author, have them sign it. Your book's so legendary about innovation, and one of the things that you have just this immense knowledge of is being early in a market, building something that no one knows they need yet. It's nascent demand. They may not even understand the pain they have because they don't realize the opportunity ahead of them. So what I wanted to ask you about was just kind of like innovation cycle and how you think about that, from the ideas that don't work to how do you know you have an idea that's worth leaning into? When do you have an idea that is worth like commercializing? How do you think about that? Because you've invented so many things that are meaningful. How do you think about the innovation cycle?
Well, first of all, you kind of glamorize this issue of thinking about the future and coming up with future products because there are a lot of skeptics around. And would you believe that 99% of the time the skeptics are right?
So, I don't believe it, but
no, it's true because for every idea like a cell phone and like a wireless charging, there are 99 other ideas that other people have that really don't have merit, and so. It can be a challenge, even when you're right. If you're wrong, well, forget it. But even when you're right, getting over or through the wall that the skeptics put up is a major challenge. But if you get to the essence of what innovation is, and to me, innovation is very simple. It's got to be something that improves the human experience. I have a mantra that's really boring that says that the definition of technology is it's the application of science to create products and services that make people's lives better. And a lot of people forget the people part about it and get caught up in the novelty, the curiosity, and those things are very nice, but they got nothing to do with technology. And that specific thing, by the way, is we witness it every day, and in big ways, like the flap about 5 and 6G. I'm sure you and your audience are quite familiar with that. I happen to be an advocate of 5 and 6G, but I think that the carriers are deluding us and misappropriating their responsibilities because it's going to be a lot of time before 5 and 6G benefit people. So I just use that as an example. But there's nothing easy about technology, but on the other hand, it is for people like me who have uncontrolled imagination. It's an exciting kind of thing always. I tell people when they ask me what it's like to be a futurist, I say the reason that I know a little bit about the future is I spend so much time there, because I do spend a lot of time, Jacob, dreaming about things, and that's not a very good approach for somebody like who's in a role like yours, where you're a chief executive, and you got to worry about what I consider to be minor details like revenues and profits and that nature. So excuse me for talking so long on that subject, but I think I got off the track.
No, it's beautiful. It really reminds me about the quote, or I'm sure it's a paraphrase at this point, that Edison said he didn't fail 10,000 times in creating the light bulb. He just found 10,000 ways that don't work until he got to the one that does work.
Yeah.
And just how living in the future and thinking about, what people need and how hard it is to get there. And, the skeptics were right on him 10,000 times. That he's not going to create a light bulb that works and is commercially viable and is interesting, but he did break through, and he created something that, really materially changed the world and the quality of life for humanity. And that's that other point that you were really hitting on, which is, technology that doesn't serve an improvement to the human condition or humanity, doesn't really serve anything. It's kind of like, maybe a passion project of the creator. You need technology. You need to be thinking about the user. You need to be thinking about the benefit it delivers, if you want it to be meaningful. Otherwise, to what end are you inventing it if it's not going to improve the lives of the users?
Yeah. Well, your example of Edison, whom I don't like very much, but
are you a Tesla guy?
Well, yeah, as a matter of
we're team Tesla here because of his wireless power innovations.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of innovation happens in Chicago, Marty. You invented, I think, the cell phone here. Tesla first unveiled wireless power at the 1893 World's Fair, the Columbian Exposition here in Chicago. Obviously, New Current's doing a lot of our own inventing here. This is a underrated innovation hub here in Chicago, but we're team Tesla too.
You don't have to sell me on that. But the point I was making is that there are two issues that the innovator has to do. Is number one, be persistent, because and in fact, I've got a mantra about that Motorola taught me, and that is do not fear failure. Reach out. So persistence is really important. And the second one that Edison illustrated is objectivity. You really do have to, dreaming is a good thing, but at some point you do have to face reality and bump your ideas and your progress against objective facts. And if you get carried away and try to do a product, an idea on emotion, you are in deep trouble.
Yeah. Interesting. He definitely seemed to, in the dynamic of Edison and Tesla, the whole Westinghouse, and is it JP Morgan was the other one? They also kept them very grounded in objectivity and business progress, not just wild dreams. And Tesla probably was a little bit more of a wild dreamer, bigger picture, using the Earth's resonant frequency to create free electricity for everyone. It was his thing, but I don't think the bankers liked him quite as much because he wasn't drawing it down to how are you going to productize this and make some money out of it. Well,
the one thing we shouldn't do is use Tesla and Edison as examples of ideal entrepreneurs, because they were. Edison was not a very nice person. He was totally focused on himself. And Tesla was, I hate to put it that way because I have so much admiration for him, but he was a little crazy. So if you have read all the stories about him, but the reality is that he really did invent wireless communications, not Marconi. who I also admire because he commercialized radio. But Tesla was the dreamer and in many ways the executor. So there are other entrepreneurs that we could use as examples, like Jacob.
Oh, get out of here. You stole my line. I was literally just about to tell you. I mean, I get the privilege of talking to one of my inventor mentors here, one of my heroes, Time Magazine's top, 100 inventors of all time right here, like in this conversation. If you had a chance to talk to any inventors from history, if it's not Edison and Tesla and Marconi, who do you really look up to? Who should other innovators, aspiring innovators, or current innovators study other than you, of course, but you're not going to say yourself because you're too modest. So I'll say you, and now you give me another person that they should look into.
I hate to use this as an example because I don't understand him, but Elon Musk has got to be some kind of a genius in this area.
Sure.
I have met him. I've heard him speak. Both of those events were not events. The only thing he has demonstrated is he really does understand the nature of the products that he's gone after, and he is relentless. And he certainly doesn't fear failure, for sure. And so far he is just doing incredibly. The only problem with Elon is he seems to have a huge ego, and ego is a part of this thing we're discussing. You have to be careful of. You need ego to get past the skeptics, the naysayers. But on the other hand, your ego can give you a feeling of power that you don't have and maybe shouldn't have. What I like about the Elon Musk story is that when necessary, he really got in and got his hands dirty. I don't know how much he contributed to the crisis they had on the factory floor building the Tesla car. But he actually had a cot there and did sleep there overnight. At least that's the myth. And I have to tell you, Jacob, that I have done that in my career. So I spent nights working on stuff. I took a week of vacation off when, if you read the book, we talked about Motorola's quartz crystal resonator business. And my wife didn't like it very much, but I took a week off and spent it just sitting in the manufacturing area and working with the people and trying to understand what the nature of the quartz crystal manufacturing business was. Because you cannot manage those things and predict them without really understanding. And understanding is not all that easy.
Yeah, I don't think any meaningful product that has really made an impact on humanity ever got away with following a schedule, being delegated down, and not having, the lead inventors and the lead visionaries rolling up their sleeves, sleeping on the floor, and getting it off the ground. You need that relentlessness, you need that passion, and you do need teams to get there. And you know that very well, because you really worked with the team to invent the phone, and you're very clear about that. It wasn't a one-person show. Can you talk a little bit more about innovation and how you innovate with a team concept in mind?
Well, the first issue, of course, is having the concept and believing in it and having the evidence to support it. But you're quite right. I could never have done anything without people. When you talk about the team, first of all, I was extraordinarily fortunate in getting to work at Motorola because they tolerated me for 29 years. And boy, did I not fit into the corporate mold. I was just never, ever a corporate guy, even though they kept giving me titles. They kept knocking themselves out to come up with a corporate role that I could fit into. And they would put me in these. I'll give you an example. I'm getting off the subject, but
Oh, please.
They recognized that I was really good at conceiving of ideas, of understanding them, I could lead teams very well. I was really not very good at managing the P&L. So they assigned a guy who really was good at it, as assistant general manager of this division. And here I am, the general manager. And it turns out it was a total failure because this guy got into this role and he looked at all the fun that I was having and he wanted to be just like me. So that doesn't always work out. But certainly one of the issues is you need investors or management that will support you. And they are part of the team no matter what. And the only challenge there is that a lot of people like venture capitalists who have big egos will decide that they know more than you do about the business. And they'll start trying to do your job, and that doesn't work out well. At the other end, if you don't have a team of people, first of all, that are confident, you ought to forget it. So, and that's one of the challenges there is hiring people and getting them to believe the vision. And then once that happens, the thing develops a life of its own. You don't have to convince people to work overnight and sleep on the floor. They get, if they believe in the vision, they believe in the management, they will build up their own enthusiasm. And that is what happened with our team. Just to remind your audience, we actually, from the time I had the idea of we ought to take on the Bell system and actually demonstrate a handheld portable telephone to the time we actually had one working was only a little over 3 months. And the guys really had to kill themselves. So they had two challenges. One is at the very beginning, even the guy who was leading the effort, Don Linder, he was very unsure that he could do it. I was sure he could do it, but I didn't have the confidence to do it. But he said all he could tell me was that he was going to do his very best. So even with that uncertainty, he put his life into it, and together we communicated that to the rest of the team. And without that enthusiasm, dedication, nothing would have happened. So it really is a very, I hate to put it that way because it sounds a very unscientific and very emotional. And I believe very strongly in the whole concept of evidence and objectivity, but you do need a little emotion, don't you? And I know you practice that yourself at New Current.
There's too many things that get in the way of, just if it's just logic driven. I think innovation's too hard. I think that making things that don't exist is too challenging. If you don't have some greater purpose, or if you don't have some emotional commitment to it, there's just easier ways to make a living, or there's easier ways to go about doing a 9 to 5. You don't get into innovation because you want the easy path. You get into it because you want to make a difference. You want to make a change. And you have to be driven by that because it's definitely not the easy path to take.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. But it's also very rewarding when you do succeed. That if you're take chances, which I've done all my life, there are a lot of downs, but those ups are really wonderful.
Yeah.
And I hope that you're in a mode of the up side of your business as well.
I think sometimes it's hard as an entrepreneur to always step back and celebrate the ups, because there's always paranoia about the next one and keeping moving forward. But yeah, when you see your product on a shelf, for you, for us, we're not the technology, we're the technology inside of products, whether that's a Honeywell device or a Whoop wearable or Klipsch audio products or whatever it is. Sometimes nice to see our logo on their box that says powered by New Current. It really, those are things you can celebrate and be really proud of. But I do need to take a little extra. I need to take a little extra discipline to celebrate the ups. because no one really needs to give me extra motivation to be passionate about inventing new ways of users to experience electronic devices, or improving the quality of devices, reducing failures, improving functionality. That's easy. That's natural for me. It's a little harder for me to stop, take a breath, celebrate with the team, and recognize what we've accomplished. But sometimes these types of conversations are the best reminder that it's important to, just look backwards and see how far you've come in the last 3 months or the last 3 years, because it is really remarkable. And, to be able to celebrate that with your team is, I guess it's really one of the things that you're doing it for. So I appreciate the reminder, but I do need it relatively frequently.
Yeah. Well, I understand it, and what's remarkable about the progress Nucard has made, and my purpose here is not to pump up Nucard. We're here talking about innovation, but you've got so many competitors that, and I'm a strong advocate of competition, keeps you on your toes, but that makes your job all the harder, and it makes you, I think, makes you sharper than you would have been otherwise. But all these competitors you have certainly validated the nature of the business you're in. Sure. It is going to be a huge business in the future. In fact, I just read a report the other day where they talk about in 5 years, it's going to be a multi-billion-dollar industry. So I hope Nucard has a big hunk of those billions.
Yeah, me too. And all our investors watching, of course, do too. And I think we are in a great position. The thing that, I like about competition is in nascent markets, like wireless charging is largely a nascent market other than mobile phones. It's really important for, the word to get out about the opportunity to solve existing pain points that, in the case of wireless power, for example, pogo pins have been utilized for decades in product design to make mechanical interconnects between devices. But today, if you're a mechanical designer, you just kind of assume that's what you're going to use, even though they kind of suck. Like connectors do suck. They're not fun. You wouldn't use them if you had another alternative, but there haven't been alternatives for the past 40 years. Now there's an alternative. So the nice thing about competition is competition helps build awareness for the pain that companies are going through when they're designing products. Then the companies can start saying, oh, I have a vision for how to solve this. I'm not going to use pogo pins anymore. I'm going to start using wireless charging and wireless data. Now, who should I go to? And that's where that's where you want to start differentiating from the competition on why we're the best solution and the right solution and have launched more mass production products than anyone else. That's where the competition takes place. But up until then, getting the word out and getting the message out and evangelizing the problems that are solved with wireless charging, the more competition, the better, because we're getting the word out, and it allows that rising tide rises all boats in that situation.
Yeah. That's interesting, because I never thought about it before, but it's a challenge for you to convince a customer, like a toothbrush manufacturer, that his product will be much better with this little addition on it, which has nothing to do with brushing your teeth. And, right. So which I hate to bring up my old boy stories, but when we came out with the first radio pagers, which most of your audience probably doesn't even know what a pager is, but that used to be.
I've seen one before, Marty. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Those are the things that you clipped on your belt?
Yeah. Well, that was one of the industries that I had some impact on early in my career. But one of the things I had to convince my team, who were extraordinary RF engineers, we even had one guy that knew how to make an integrated circuit to indicate how long ago this was. But it turns out the biggest point of failure in the radio pages we were building was the on-off switch. The failure rate of this mechanical switch was higher than the combination of everything else. Wow. And convincing them that either you got to get rid of that switch or make it electronics. That turned out to be a major challenge because they wanted to make better switches, and it just turned out mechanical switches were just not the right way to do it. And now you're facing exactly the same thing with the connectors. So, in fact, one of our competitors, when we were building handheld portable two-way radios, came up with a brilliant technical concept was modules. Okay. He was worried about repairing these things, where he should have been worried, by the way, of making them more reliable. Mm-hmm. And so he built a product that had a whole bunch of modules so that if something broke, you could just replace the module. Great idea, right? It also introduced hundreds of mechanical contacts, and there's no way to build that product, even with today's technology, never mind 30 or 40 years ago. So sometimes you could have what you think is a good idea, and it's disastrous.
Yeah, it's history repeats itself, right? So both in terms of the on-off switch with the pager, and essentially that's the same problem that product companies are facing today with pogo pins and spring clips and other kind of physical connectors. But the other way history repeats itself is almost literal. I remember when Google owned Motorola Mobility, they publicly had a project going. I can't remember the name right now, but I'm sure we can put it up on the screen. We'll find it. But what it was is a modular phone. It was a modular mobile phone. You could put on different things. And so this was a little different. This wasn't for replaceability or repairability. But what this was for is like, if you wanted a big hefty camera, you could put on a 4-square module. If you want a small camera, it could be a 1-square module. If you want great speakers, you could put different modules on. So it was like a bunch of tiles on the back of the phone. And I'm just sitting here listening to you talk about one of your competitors that invented a modularized phone, probably 30, 40 years in advance of that. And they went for it again. And truthfully, I think one of the biggest failure points was all of the connectors. The physical connectors made that device, although really interesting in concept, very, very difficult, if not impossible, to manufacture at mass production scale and at price and at costs levels where they could price it appropriately for the customer. So history really does repeat itself, huh?
Well, it does, but although it's troubling when you say that, and I'm sitting here at my desk looking at all these devices. I do have a wireless keyboard and a mouse, but everything else is mechanical connectors. I'm still old-fashioned enough to have a desktop computer. Yeah. Actually, in my case, it's a floor top. But I would bet this computer has at least several hundred contacts in it. All these boards plugged into it, and a whole bunch of USB stuff plugged into it. It's amazing. They got to keep it working, isn't it?
It's it's very complex and it's very impressive, but it's what used to be necessary, and it isn't necessary anymore. But there's still a big, if the left bank of the river is what it used to be and the right bank of the river is what it can be today, there's still that bridge you have to build across the river to get the products and the product engineers and the product managers to start understanding the possibility of what happens once they move over to this side. And I talk about wireless power really coming in 3 waves. And I'd be interested in if you think this is a good framework, or if you think there's a different waves, or if you disagree. The 3 waves that wireless power comes in are characterized by the question that is asked in each wave. And so the first wave of wireless power that we've already passed is, how do I get rid of this plug? So how do I not have to plug this phone in? And that's wireless charging question number 1. That's wave 1. That's been going on. That's mobile phones. That's cars that can charge mobile phones. That's earbuds starting to have it in the case, earbuds starting to have it in the earbud instead of the clips to charge the earbuds. So that's already been happening. How do I get rid of the connector to charge the device? The second wave, I believe, is when people realize, wait, it doesn't all have to be battery charging. you can just transfer power, and you can transfer power and data simultaneously over the same system. So they asked the question, what connectors can I replace? And so that, I think, is phase two. And I think we're entering that. I think there are some innovative companies that are really exploring that and seeing what kind of value that brings to them for manufacturing reasons, for durability reasons, for reliability reasons, for user experience improvements. But it's still not the most interesting question. I think the most interesting question is phase three, wave three. And wave three is the future looking question. Wave one and two are backwards looking because it's always starting with the starting point, and it's saying, how do I get rid of this? Wave three is the best question, in my opinion, because it's the one that says, what can I do with a product now that I know you don't need physical contact as a starting point? So how can I reconceive an entire new product category, a whole new thing? Because legacy design would tell me I need to have some form of contact in order to make this thing possible. But I know that's not true anymore. So let me wipe the slate clean. And now let me think about consumer products, or now let me think about industrial IoT sensors. And I think that's where it gets really exciting. I don't see a lot of that innovation yet in the product community, but those are the three waves of wireless power that I think about. How does that resonate with you?
Well, I'd sure love to hear an example of that last one. If I don't want you to give away any of your brilliant innovations, but
I'll give one away for free. And in the spirit of your innovative innovative hero that you talked about, Elon Musk, I'll give this one away for free in case anyone wants to do it. So it's kind of a silly one, but I think it's illustrative. So if you think about like swimming pools or hot tubs, they have a very big problem when it comes to electricity. They have a lot of water in them, right? And water and electricity still don't mix very well when you have to expose contacts and metals. So my thinking is, what if you're trying to take this forward-looking wave three concept where you're saying, what kind of product can I create now that contact isn't even a requirement? What I'm thinking about, for example, is interchangeable underwater lighting. So think about, basically taking an LED puck and putting it in your pool. Maybe you just attach it to the wall with a magnet, and you can address it. It can change the colors for ambiance and stuff like that. I mean, it's more of like a novelty. It's more entertaining and fun. It's not going to cure a disease. It's not going to make the world like a significantly better place, but it will make it more fun and interesting, and for the people that use it. And it gets around this constraint of putting power through water, which currently today you just can't do very well, very reliably or very inexpensively. So I really would hope that there are product innovators out there that are way better at conceiving new products than I am, because I'm more of a technology on the inside kind of guy. But maybe the water lighting example might spur some thinking for more creative people than me.
Well, let me encourage you a little bit, even though I hate your example. But not only do you eliminate the connectors, the biggest thing you do with that is eliminate the waterproofing. Because I do have a hot tub, and I do have lighting in the hot tub, and there has to be a light and a seal. And if that seal fails, you're in deep trouble. So the example there is that you not only eliminate connectors, but you eliminate waterproof seals.
The IP ratings for devices, Marty, is absolutely one of the biggest reasons that companies start adopting wireless charging today. Most of the industry over the past 5 years has really thought about wireless charging as this user experience enhancement. And I think that what mobile phones have showed people is that the current iteration of wireless charging for mobile phones, where you have to put a phone down on a charging stand, it's better than having to plug it in with two hands. You always know where it is, but it's not like a game changer. It's a nice to have, not a need to have. So the paradigm has shifted for a lot of product designers, where they're thinking about wireless charging as a user experience benefit, but even more importantly, it's a product enhancement by making the IP ratings much easier to accomplish at a lower cost and at much higher reliability. So waterproofing, dust proofing. That's why we see a lot of wireless charging pick up and traction in industrial and medical spaces in particular, because they're even more sensitive to the quality of their products being measured by their ability to be used in hazardous environments or being used in the presence of blood or saline. And so you picked up on one of the things that is a major pain point in that wireless charging addresses, which is waterproofing and dustproofing and IP protection.
I love your idea about using a new technology and to stimulate the creativity of new markets. Because I'm facing one of the only thing I didn't like about your hot tub example is I have some priorities that are a little higher than that. I want to revolutionize the education system. I want to revolutionize healthcare. And one example that I observe that is troublesome to me is how the carriers today are promoting, I think I mentioned this at the beginning of our talk, promoting 5G, which I think is great. And they've got a technology they use there called MIMO.
Multi-input, multi-output antennas, right?
Which you use for wireless charging in a sense, but this is for communications. And what they're using the MIMO for is to, in essence, to focus energy and make it go through walls and windows. But it turns out that MIMO has another attribute, and that is that you can have it select whether to increase capacity, in other words, create multiple points of distribution, all with one antenna, or extend range. And it turns out to be an ideal solution for the educational problem for unserved areas of our country. And it turns out that something over 20% of the students in this country have no access to wireless broadband.
Yep.
Which is a disaster, because I don't think you can get educated today without having that kind of access. And it hurts me to see MIMO being used almost exclusively for millimeter wave communications, which I think is, we haven't got into the concept of spectrum yet. But one thing that I have been touting for 20 years or so is that we do not have a shortage of spectrum. We have an abundance of spectrum. And what we have a shortage of people using the appropriate tools to make the spectrum more effective, increase capacity. So excuse me for that digression.
No, I mean, you hit on a very important personal passion of mine, which is education. I think you know that I used to be a teacher in the St. Louis public school systems as part of Teach for America. And it's really shaped my thinking about, educational inequity. And I agree with you that access to the internet is the new library. It's way better. It's 100 times better than the library, but it's that ability to educate yourself and, watch YouTube videos and read articles and learn. And there's so much self-help availability on there, but only if you can access it. So, it's an unbelievable equalizer in terms of educational opportunity. It's not enough on its own, but it's a huge step forward if people can access it. And your point is, all the content in the world can exist in the internet, but if 20% of the country's children can't access it, is it really serving its highest purpose? And I think the answer is no. We need to focus on getting more access. So it really meets a very important and common interest that I have with you, which is educational inequities.
Yeah, actually, by the way, the number, the 20% are people that don't have access because there's no coverage in their area, but there's another 20 or 30%, maybe more, that don't have access because they can't afford it.
Yeah,
which is another travesty. And by the way, MIMO smart antennas address that problem as well. If you make RF transmission more efficient, it gets less expensive and hopefully less costly to people. So we do share that. And boy, was it hard to sell that story. But convincing people that you need wireless broadband for education with the same priority that all the rest of it, they say, well, people should be able to use cable. And well, wait a second, why did we eliminate, or why are we eliminating the wired phone? You know, the number of wired phones is now down to, in the United States, in the order of 40 or 50 million, which is, I don't calculate it as fast as I used to, but that's only the order of 10 or 15% penetration in cell phones, or over 100% penetrated. So now they're saying that, well, children don't need wireless communication. So changing common knowledge is very hard. And yet the FCC is proposing to subsidize cable service for children in areas where they don't have wireless coverage. I think that's a travesty. So, yeah. And yet there are ways of making the business of delivering education to uncovered areas. They can make that a profitable business and have business to it instead of taxpayers subsidizing. So, sorry about getting up on my pulpit, but you can tell what I've been thinking about lately.
Yeah, I'm letting it go because I love to hear it. It's important. You know, one thing I think that I would say, I'm pretty optimistic, and I think you are too. Even when you're addressing real important problems, you're always looking at the solution. And one thing that I'd say from, you know, running a company now where we do employ a lot of you know, millennial and Gen Z people, I think that and let's just, you know, I've heard them referred to, or maybe I should say us, I do fit in the millennial profile a little bit, as native digitals, you know, versus native analogs, where a lot of life exists on the internet and the analog portion of life is more supplemental to the digital portion of life. And it's you know, we can talk about the goods and the bads of that all day. But I think the reality is that the recognition of what you're talking about, which is the need for wireless connectivity for everyone, is pretty much, I don't think you'd have a hard time convincing a Gen Zer of that. I think they would say, do we really have to have that conversation? That seems crazy that that's not the way it is. That's obviously how it should be. So I think that there's a lot of hope in the, you know, in the upcoming generations that are entering the workforce right now. Millennials getting into position of leadership and power, and Gen Z, which are really, you know, also not waiting around for permission. They're making things happen. They're educating people on the internet. They are making change happen using their digital voice and the inherent scale that comes with being digital. And so I think there's real hope that what you're talking about with creating connectivity equity for everybody with wireless connectivity, it's still going to take time, you know, and there's still some old school thinking, backwards thinking of why don't we just make the, you know, the old solution better and cheaper. I wouldn't be surprised to see a change and a shift happen with this upcoming generation that I think doesn't need any convincing. They just need to understand the problem and they'll get it done.
I have no argument with you at all. I have a slightly different viewpoint that's caused by the fact that I'm 93 years old. I don't have as much time as you do, but absolutely, I am optimistic, and I know it's going to happen. It's just a question of when.
Yeah. So I just said there was only one other question that I wanted to make sure I asked you, before we were done, but then we can talk about anything else. I'll stay on as long as you'd like, because this is amazing. The question that I thought about before we joined is I really loved the story that I think about as your co-opetition story, which is, you know, AT&T and your thoughts on AT&T when you were creating the cell phone. And, you know, the little nuggets of the story that I'm thinking about are, you know, how you chose to make the first call to a team member from AT&T. And part of your motivation was I think you didn't believe in AT&T's vision of what wireless telecommunications should be. But at the same time, you were cooperating with them. You were kind of partnering and you were kind of competing. You were using them as the motivation and the enemy to beat. But at the same time, you recognized the need for them. So can you just talk to me a little bit about the complexities of, what I'm terming as, co-opetition in this innovative process, especially in a complex ecosystem like mobile phones, where you don't just create a widget, you create a device that needs the connectivity, that needs the data, that needs the routing, there's so many pieces to the pie. So how did you think about that then? And how have you grown to think about that over time?
Okay, well, I want to make sure that your audience understands that I'm not promoting my book, but one of the points I tried to make in my book is that the big ideas don't happen in a eureka moment. They grow with knowledge, experience, failures, and so the predecessor of the cell phone were things like radio pagers. There was a generation of mobile phones, car phones before that called IMTS. And so in every one of those things, the environment that I lived in was that the Bell system was the biggest company in the world by every measure, number of employees, revenues, profit, every measure. And they had, worldwide, they were monopolies. And boy, do you learn how to hate monopolies when you're, on the other hand, they were, if you wanted to be in the business, you had to sell to them as well. And it turns out that in each of the examples I just gave, paging, IMTS,
Yep.
and cellular, in fact, there was even one earlier than that. In each case, we did approach the Bell system, and they got involved one way or another and made a contribution. But in every case, we ended up prevailing over this huge organization because they did not have the do not fear failure approach, and they did not have the vision of a future that they didn't create. And so you end up with the understanding that arrogance is the one failure that will stop any business. And that is the nature of monopolies. You cannot be in a monopoly without being arrogant and assuming that you have all the answers, and that your solution is the only one. You have to be humble, and there's nothing like competition to make you humble. It turns out we were very fortunate in every time that we came up against the Bell system. All they did was stimulate us to fight harder. And in every case, ultimately, we won. Some minor battles in the middle that we didn't. But the danger is arrogance. So which leads me back to, since you're going to edit this thing, you asked me about some of the aspects of innovation. And one of them is that one I don't have to teach you about is paranoia. When you start an innovative business, you cannot afford to be arrogant. You can't afford to even be comfortable. That's the world's worst word. You have to be paranoid.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that we did in the two-way radio business at Motorola. And Motorola was a relatively small company, and the two-way radio business was even smaller. And our competitors were General Electric and RCA. So, we had, in fact, our share market was so high that we were never permitted to mention that number because we were in the low 80%, if you could imagine that. And if the management had a fear, it was that we would be accused of having monopolistic
Trust,
practice. So do me one favor before we hang up. I got the picture of wave one,
Yep.
which is the one we're in right now. Eliminate the connector. And I really appreciate wave three. I love that concept of stimulating products that would not even be possible. But I didn't quite capture the significance of wave two.
All right. So I think the best way to distinguish wave two is actually by restating wave one a little bit more clearly. So wave one is more like, how do I charge this battery without plugging it in? Wave two is, how do I eliminate this connector? So you know that there's a variety of interconnect systems that are used for many reasons beyond recharging lithium ion batteries. And wave one of wireless power is actually called wireless charging. And it's always thinking about the load is a lithium ion battery. And how do I charge the battery without plugging in? That's really wave one. Wave two is, how can I move power and data from point A to point B without having physical contact? That's how do I eliminate the connector? And then wave three is starting with the different starting point, which is understanding that physical contact is not necessary. What kind of products can I build to improve the world at this point?
Have you got an example of a wave two?
Yeah. So I want to do this without, well, I'll say it to you. And I want to keep it non-specific so that it's, because this is a real program, but there's a sensor, let's say, that's inside of a pressurized tank. Let's say for a vacuum cleaner, for example. So you want to put a sensor in there to see how full is the vacuum cleaner, or how gummed up is the filter, for the HEPA filter and stuff like that, for air quality and pollution and allergies. So there's sensors that they want to put in there. But the problem is, if you have to run wires or physical contacts to a sensor that's inside of a pressurized tank, now you get into gasketing, and you get into all those things that we were talking about before with IP ratings. It's similar for pressure. You want to maintain the pressure environment. So the better thing to do is just power the sensor directly through the wall of the tank without having to create any mechanical break in the seal. And so you can put power in and you can get data out, and everyone's much happier. And now you can do a contactless connector for something like a vacuum cleaner tank that has analog sensors in it, that does improve quality of life for people that have allergies, or just it lets them be better about like cleaning and all that stuff, makes a better product.
Yeah, I got it. So wave two hasn't really kicked in yet.
Not really kicked in, but I would say I feel like there should be stuff in the market right now, but it's not there yet. We have a few things in the pipeline. The areas that we see the most is related to sensors, so analog sensors. Another good example is like a tool that let's say it's like a surgical tool that has a few different interchangeable implements on the end. So you can take them off and put them on, but the battery and the brains are in the handle. So you need to pass enough power once you attach it to operate the cutters, or operate the laser, or whatever it is. And there's usually like tissue detection sensors on there. So that you can detect what kind of tissue it is to cut or to not cut. And then that has to go back to the brains of the system to shut off and say, no, don't ablate that portion. So the thing is, those devices already exist today, but the way that you connect the tip to the handle is through multi-pin connectors, like an 8-pin connector. So there's 6 data channels, and there's a plus and a minus power. Yeah. But if you're using this in a blood-rich environment like surgery, where there's saline and there's blood and there's doctors that are putting all the pressure on it to get it in the right position, connectors are not built for those environments, and they cause them to break. And you can imagine how expensive it is from a financial and humanitarian perspective for a major tool like that to break in the midst of a surgery. You can imagine that the surgeons don't stop to troubleshoot. They throw it in the garbage and they probably don't use that tool ever again. And they switch companies because they can't believe that now they have to like waste time with a patient on the bed in a very expensive operating room, not working on the patient and instead dealing with a device that broke. So there's a sensor on the end of that. There's no battery on the end of that. It's causing an action to happen. The load is an actual mechanical action. It's coming, but there's not a singular killer app today. I would definitely say that there's not like a whole category that's about to flip on its head. It's more really innovative companies are starting to understand where they have pain points with their connectors. And they're starting to raise their hand and say, I'm done with these spring clips, or I'm done with these pogo pins. I believe you can do it in small spaces. I believe you can do power and data, and let me see what's possible so I can seal this for IP ratings. I can bleed all over the thing and it won't matter because it's sealed behind plastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if it was even in the book, but the very first pagers we made were for doctors in Mount Sinai Hospital in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just learning how to do inductive transmission.
Yeah.
They were just terrible products, very unreliable. We had a case of a doctor he got so frustrated, he took his pager and threw it against the wall. And we came into Mount Sinai and said, look, we made a mistake. We're a reliable company. We're going to take the system out. We're going to fix it and give us some time. And they said, absolutely not. We are so dependent on this that unreliable or not, you cannot take this out. You got to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of product you want to build, right?
That's some serious need. They even as mad as they were at it, they need it even more. And so now that's a good target for the engineering team to actually make it more reliable, make it useful. But you have product market fit in that moment.
Yeah, we do. Well, Jacob, you're an inspiring. What do you call that? Interviewer. Mediator.
Thank you.
And I really I always enjoy talking to you. So, and you know that I wish you luck at New Current, and anything I can do to support you, I will.
I appreciate it so much. It's a real honor to talk with you, as always.
Well, enjoyed the session and look forward to next time.
Thanks, Marty. Take care.